You're welcome back. It's still Business Morning right here on Channels Television, and we intend to speak with Dr. Tayo Aduloju, the Chief Executive Officer of the NESG, on the ongoing summit. Dr. Aduloju, good morning and welcome to the program.
And thank you for having us.
Great. So we saw the Vice President at your meeting, at your summit yesterday. I think for me, one major thing that he said there, apart from all of the promises and the focus and all, is that he's going to take the results and the opinions and suggestions from the summit to the president. Because a lot of people would say, yes, this is your 31st summit, you've been having all of that. Where are the impacts? Where do we see the results of all the brilliant conversations? And I did listen to some of your sessions yesterday, especially the one with the Minister of Digital Economy. Very brilliant session you had there. But where does it take us to? How does it change anything in the economy?
So yes, we had a really fantastic start yesterday. And as you noted, there were many things in the Vice President's address that he delivered on behalf of His Excellency President Tinubu. I think the most important charge to the private sector was the need to truly get in and on the big agendas, especially the agendas that linked specifically to our capacity to translate quickly recommendations into action. And I think there was a broad commitment from Mr. Vice President to act on recommendations as quickly as they got them. And so we take that very seriously to ensure that the sessions from the summit have the forward guidance necessary in the shortest possible time to, in the next 1-2 weeks, that they're at the key desks of the policymakers that need to act on them for the Federal Executive Council to review. He also challenged us on, I think, in his statement, about Alhaji Dangote being an institution, pointed to a bigger question of how we treat our investors. It's going to be Nigerian transnational conglomerates and businesses that will compete across Africa in the ACFTA and across the economy. And so one of the challenges for the Vice President is for business leaders to come together and think about a formidable industry, labor, market performance framework. So as we liberalize markets and make them more competitive, we have a framework and a governance architecture for how these markets, manage losers, winners, in building the Nigeria of our dreams. As you know, every time you liberalize a market, you also create some disruption. With those disruptions, there are inevitable losers and winners. And a regulatory governance framework has to allow these markets to transition in a responsible way while protecting key investments. And I think that's why Mr. Vice President gave that the needed push. And I think that we're in full support of that position of Mr. Vice President in moving things forward. And so I think we are committed as the NESG, and I think the business leaders are geared in, locked in. They're deeply embedded in the sessions with very serious conversations going on across board. The Minister of Trade threw a challenge to us on industrialization. Yesterday, we take that very seriously. So we'll be back with our notes on that. The Minister of Digital, like we pointed out, threw some strong challenges on digital transformation. Again, I think there will be a strong, robust response on the private sector. So I think one of the things you will see in this year's summit report, which will come out in very quick succession, will be a really solid action framework with responsibilities and accountabilities for both government and captains of industry to implement side by side, and to do so with really short 30, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days, 1 year timelines, which allows Nigerians to see that the summit this year takes the platform to another level, ready to be calibrated for broad-based, serious action over the next few days and months. And I think that's where we push everyone, on the seriousness on converging on what matters the most, whilst resolving the challenges of Nigeria's economic transformation. Last thing to just point out is that one of the big lessons from yesterday as a whole, the summary of yesterday, is Nigeria's economic transformation is built and will be built on several pillars. The pillar of ensuring that our resources, our assets are optimized for industrialization has to happen, and we must commit to that together. The days of supporting assets that don't perform are gone. You can't invest over $100 billion in a refinery over decades. It doesn't work, and people say, oh, you mustn't sell it, you mustn't transform it, you mustn't reform it. Those days are gone, right? But at the same time, you must have labor that is well settled in stable, fair, transparent jobs and contracts that allow them to contribute, because labor is a key factor of production, right? And labor should be pro-productivity, pro-results, pro-growth, pro-markets. And then we must transform capital. A big part of yesterday was thinking about how do you finance all of this? Nigeria is a $3 trillion opportunity that must be financed. How do you do that? Just by the way, back to labor, we released a jobs and productivity report yesterday, where Nigeria must create 27 million jobs every year. Chidozie, I've been thrown offline, I think.
On, Dr. Aduloju, you're on. We can hear you and see you.
I think something seemed to have thrown me off. Sorry.
No, you're on. You're still on.
Sorry, these things. My screen just went off. Sorry about that.
We can still see you and hear you. Please go ahead.
So 27 million jobs.
Sorry, Dr. Aduloju, if you could start. Sorry, just so you sound whole. You were talking about the jobs report. Let's start from the top there.
Sorry. Yes. So I said the jobs and productivity report we released yesterday shows that Nigeria must create 27 million new jobs by 2030. That's about 5 million jobs a year. Now, for that to happen, right, we must attract the capital that creates the opportunities, that creates the jobs, right? And to do that, we must become more investment friendly. And we must make sure that we are targeting the jobs that allows us to put more Nigerians to work, but to put more Nigerians into productive work and not create more working poor jobs. A large segment of Nigerians are working. It's not like they don't have work. It's that the work keeps them in poverty, keeps them below the poverty line. And that has to be changed. So one of the push yesterday on labor matters is we must create more decent, fair, transparent, productive, profitable work that lifts more people out of poverty. And to do that, we must open up the sectors that can attract investment. And I think we pointed in our report to the sectors with high impact, high investment opportunities that those investments can go in. So labor intensive, high job elasticity sectors. So one of the outcomes of the summit will now be this rapid consensus on what the jobs agenda for Nigeria will be. Now, the other part of the human condition that came out at the summit was the target by the Honorable Minister for Budget and Economic Planning to eliminate poverty by 2030. Multidimensional poverty in Nigeria, which stood at 133 million people in 2022, to take that number down from 51%, to sub 30%. Will require all hands on deck. And, social protection and social investment is an important part of that, those that have already fallen through the cracks. But if you do not create jobs that lift more people out of poverty permanently, into economic empowerment, social protection will not be enough.
Yeah, so Dr. Aduloju, you talked about the need to create jobs. And of course, that is directly tied to the need for stable government policy, a friendly investment environment, and you have the ear I believe you still have the ear of the executive represented by the vice president. We know if you talk to a lot of people, intending investors already, even for instance, I just spoke to a couple of investors at the coastal, the Lagos-Calabar Coastal Road, and they shared, their grievances where they had invested, and then suddenly all of this is happening, and they don't seem to be satisfied with what the government is offering them. So issues like this obviously are direct threats to this dream of creating, you did say 5 million jobs a year. Because if you can't attract the investors or keep the investors, then it's a big problem.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we at the NESG have insisted must come out of this summit is clear economic forward guidance, right? When you want an investor to invest in your country, he must be able to think about 3, 5, 7, 10 years. If I put in $100 million, what would it translate into? Will I have a stable policy environment? Will I have a stable regulatory environment? Will I have a stable market environment? Will I have, my investments protected and supported? Will I have investor aftercare, right? When I onboard this investment and I plan for a tax regime that is X rate at Y, will that be stable? When I want to repatriate my profits to my country, when I'm, after I've made a profit, will there be the liquidity in terms of FX repatriation? These are all the questions that an investor, and of course, will my investments be secure? Will I be able to go to court in that country and adjudicate for my rights as a business and be given fair and just hearing and decisions in courts? Will contracts be enforced? These are the conversations that naturally an investor that wants to invest in any economy has. So one of the things that we have structured the summit to do is through the different sessions to provide clear consensus from the business side on what we want to see in terms of clear forward guidance in all these areas. Because these are the things you put together and you show an investor, and the investor says, yes, Nigeria is ready for business. So for example, this morning we're going to have a special session on public assets, right? Nigeria's public assets historically have underperformed. We borrow money, we put it in an airport, in a rail, in a refinery, and then these assets cannot pay back, right? That cannot be our future, right? Our future has to be that our investments in our assets must first be able to pay, especially when you borrow the money, right? Must be able to pay the debts and then create wealth for future generations. So out of that, this session, for example, we expect that there will be some clear forward guidance on asset governance in Nigeria, all the Nigerian assets, how they are performing, a clear asset risks framework, a clear institutional coordination framework as to how do you manage Nigeria's assets as a whole, what is our asset strategy, including state-owned assets that are concessioned, privatized, commercialized, or what are the guardrails for the selling of Nigerian assets to ensure that even when we do sell the assets, they are sold in the national interest and the proceeds serve the national interest and investment in future generations, right? A session like that will create clear forward guidance notes today, and that will then go to hopefully, with the government side, optimizing policy, regulation, and a new set of actions on how our assets will perform. If Nigerian assets perform at their optimal capacity by, square kilometer, we are one of the most blessed nations on earth. But if our assets don't perform, they keep operating suboptimal or operate almost as dead assets, then it doesn't matter. So I think that we've calibrated the summit to push business leaders, to push regulators, to push and challenge policymakers on what the consensus for forward guidance in all these areas are. And if an investor invests in certain types of projects, you can present all you want. An investor looks at an investment grade asset, asks questions, has it been de-risked of regulatory bottlenecks? Has it been de-risked of political bottlenecks? Has it been de-risked of security threats and issues? And when he asks all those questions, can I make money from this asset? asset? Can I create value in the society whilst making some money? Those are the choices an investor makes. And so a big part of how we have designed this summit is to solve the question of the investors that will invest in Nigeria's industrialization, in infrastructure, in the critical areas. How do they get that forward guidance they need?
All right. So Aduloju, we know that, of course, it's going to be a very rich one. I mean, I've spoken to your chief economist a couple of times, even before now. And I'm glad that you earlier, you did mention the fact that you have timelines and targets, for your recommendations. So we want you to tell us, Nigerians, when you will be back this week at the end of your summit to share with us those recommendations and the timelines. We would like to have you back this week. When are you coming back? I know how difficult it is to get it. So that's why I want you to do it in public.
I think we can all reflect. So you have my commitment that we can reflect with Nigerians at the end of the week, for example, about how the summit went.
Thursday.
And then about a week.
Thursday.
Yeah. And in about a week, when all the notes are around, you and I can do a special session that now breaks it down. These are the agreed actions. These are the timelines, because as you know, we're going to send all this to Federal Executive Council and to the National Economic Council, and we will go ahead and present to them what Nigerians want across all these big areas and get their consensus or action also. So a lot of work ahead.
So do you want to do this week or you want to do next week?
Yes, you have my commitment on that.
That was a political answer, Dr. Aduloju. But I'll let you go. I'll get back to you off air. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your conference or your summit.
Thank you for having us, my sister. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.